You guys doing okay? Can you hear me okay?
No, sir. Let me record a video.
What's that?
Can I record a video?
I can hear somebody talking.
Can I record it?
Who's asking? Tony?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm recording it too, but I'll allow recording for anybody that wants to record.
Cool. Thank you.
So Professor, did you have a question? Did you share our file already for Team 6?
Are you asking me or asking your other team members?
I'm asking you.
Why would I share your file? I can't share it. I'm not the one that created it.
Oh, okay. Because you saw my email, right?
Maybe. Remind me what it said.
I couldn't go through the VZ folder. Like I could go like the var lib and stuff, but then when I put in the VZ, it doesn't show up. So it doesn't exist.
Oh, yeah. Okay. All right. We can address that. But here, first of all, I want to, let's wait a couple more minutes to see if we can get some other people on. And I want to go through the exit survey that I published from a previous semester. And I'm actually working on an assignment right now, which is basically just a checklist that everybody needs to submit so that you can see and make sure that you're on track. And you can get a better idea of what I want. So I'll share my screen in a minute and show you what that assignment and that exit survey looks like, or you should be able to log into Blackboard and see it now. Let me know if you guys can see that if you want to go check. It's actually under assessments because it's considered a test. And I have two of them there. One's called a midterm completion status, which I'm working on, but that first item under assessment. And let me go ahead and share my screen. Do I have enough people here? I see 8 of you. Rahi, Connie, Alex, can you guys hear me? Give me either say yes on your mic or type yes in the chat window.
I can hear you. Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Okay. So you should be able to see this in Blackboard if you were to log in now. Oh, also let me, I need to record, make sure, oh yeah, I am recording this meeting. I think. Yeah, it's being recorded. So I'm recording it too, just in case you guys don't. So let's take a look at this exit survey. I'll pretend like I'm a student. So this is not the one I want you guys to take. I'm making a newer version of this for this semester because of obvious things that happened during this semester and things that we've worked on and things maybe that we haven't worked on yet. So, but for right now, this is what you guys need to use as your roadmap or your checklist to make sure you're getting things done. Okay, so can you guys see the screen okay? Okay. Let me make this a little bit bigger because I got it kind of small. Okay, so the first thing I ask is just some information to identify you. What machine were you assigned in the EI lab? And by the way, let's see, Ella, you're not here. Okay, so everybody should have had a machine assigned. Maybe you're using it, maybe you're not. At this point, you kind of have to use it to access your machine unless you're doing something else. So what's the name of your machine? And I'm going to be checking those at the end of the semester also to see what software you installed to help do your work. At the very least, you should have installed PuTTY and maybe even WinSCP. Did you take a lab tour and become familiar with the physical setup of the workstations and the servers? Some of you did and some of you did not. In other words, some of you haven't really had any hands-on experience with the servers. That's not critical that you have, but I just need you to answer that question. And again, I'm going to make a different version of this, which will have slightly differently formulated questions. But you can go ahead and do this if you want. I won't grade this version of it, but go through this. So you should have installed PuTTY and possibly WinSCP, which is another program that you might use to upload and download programs from your Windows EI Lab virtual machine to your Proxmox server. You should not always be using the console mode, which a lot of times I do use that. Excuse me, but you need to be, and so if you haven't done that, please do it. Do you guys need me to show you that real quick, or is everybody using PuTTY or has used PuTTY? You can type in the chat window there. I'm not seeing any responses. So everybody needs to have installed PuTTY and are using it to access, at the very least, their Proxmox and also possibly their container or their VM, although sometimes it's sometimes you can't initially get it to work because your container or VM might not have the SSH server installed. But everybody needs to know how to download and install PuTTY and use it because it is an industry standard thing. Okay. Describe the process and application you use to remote view your EI Lab Windows VM from home. For most of you, this should have been Google Chrome Remote. Now, a couple of you were having issues with Chrome Remote, so I walked you through setting up Team Viewer, which was another way to do it. Or there is, if you were very industrious, you could have set up VPN, which I haven't really talked about yet. I think maybe Rahi's the only one that's played with that. And I got some ideas for you, Rahi. I can actually take that server of yours and put it in my firewall so you can access it. Anyway, I'll talk to you about that after class. So describe to me the process that you followed installing Chrome Remote and whether or not that's working for you or not. You don't need to answer this question, what are the other members of your team? Because basically I'm asking a different question on this other survey. So let me just go back to this for a minute and show you what this one looks like, okay? This completion status, because this is important and you guys are still, a lot of you are still not doing this. And I have to have this information in order to grade you guys. No, that's not it. That's strange. It must have not saved the question I added. But basically the question I added was, I need you guys to provide to me the name of the spreadsheet, the name of the Google spreadsheet that you're using to put all your containers and VM information into. Okay, that spreadsheet, let's just take a look at one. Can I log into a Teams with somebody's permission? Can I log into your sheet and show the rest of the class?
Can you log in Team 6, please?
Just give me permission from one of the teams so I can show your team spreadsheet. Which team?
Team 6.
Team 6? Okay, so this is the way I'm going to grade things. I'm going to go into this way I'm going to start. 4397 team. I'm just going to Google that and see what pops up. And I probably should also choose spring. Okay, so that tells you right there that your spreadsheet that you're sharing needs to have at least these items in the title, 4397, the word team, and the word spring, and preferably the word 2020 in it. So if it's not called that, if you just called it Team 6, rename that for your team and then let your team know. So I see that one there, open systems. So let's take a look at that one and let's see if this has all the parameters that I like to see in it, or that I need to see. So I'm going to critique this if you don't mind. Okay, so there should be 2 tabs on here. The first tab should basically be the contact table, date modified, your name, your username. Now this username column, I don't see anything in here, but this needs to be a column of the username that you are commonly using, either in Proxmox or any of your containers that's something other than root. Like I use the username of Jake. The recommendation is to use that as a username. Okay, you don't need to give me your password here for this particular username. Your email address, and then optionally your telephone number. That's not critical for me to see. And now this is going to be a more critical sheet, okay? I need to see a date created, a date modified, so you need to be updating this every time you make some change to your container or your VM. So here are the container and the VM numbers for Team 6. Oh, and keep in mind, by the way, if you decide to temporarily move your VM over to a different team, don't edit this spreadsheet. Still keep your VMs and containers within your spreadsheet, within your team, and maybe make a note. What I don't see on here is I don't see a notes column. Make a notes column on here. Let's say, for example, Austin decided to migrate his container over to Proxmox 2 and is running it there for a couple of days just to see how it works. Just put a note in there like that. Okay, these are not really transactional notes. They're just more static historical notes. Okay, but I need to see some sort of notes like that. You might want to also have an additional column. Excuse me. I would probably add it here. Hope you guys don't mind me modifying your spreadsheet. Intent, or maybe purpose. What was the purpose of this container or VM that you created? Just something short. It doesn't have to be very complicated. Just the purpose of this container or VM is to, to install LAMP. Or this is my first foray into installing containers. And then as you add more things to it, put those over in the notes, like installed WordPress, for example, which we haven't done yet, but we're going to need to be doing that. That's one of the projects I want you to do. IP address, net masking gateway, and DNS server. Of course, if you created a VM of a workstation and not a server, like you installed CentOS 7 or CentOS 8 from a DVD and it's a GUI version, of course, you don't need to put all the IP address information in there. You can, but it will probably change if DHCP is enabled. So just put DHCP in there for all of these. Okay, and that'll tell me, and that'll tell you too. You're doing this really for 2 reasons, guys. You're doing this so you get in the good habit of doing this, first of all, because you're going to be operating in a shared environment when you go off to get jobs, or when you go off to work, you're going to be needing to document all of this. 50% of what network managers do And people that are using open systems is documentation, not writing code. It's filling out spreadsheets and documenting stuff, moving things around. The only thing that's really never in these kind of files is the password there, but that's just because we're in a test environment. Normally, you never store a password like that in this sort of a file unless it's password protected. We make a spreadsheet that might have a master list of all the passwords, and we heavily encrypt that.
Professor Jake,
Yeah,
I disabled all passwords and I'm using public key authentication. Do I get rid of that and just put passwords again?
you use something like that. Well, here's the deal. If you wanted me to take a look at the container or the VM, or if I was curious about it, I want to go look at Ravi's VM and see what he did here. How would I be able to get access?
Through the Proxmox console.
Okay, then you need to put note, then you can continue to do what you're doing and just make sure you put that in the notes.
Okay.
With, PCT enter and then the name of the container, for example. Or if you want to add me as a user on there, or you want to invite anybody else onto your container or your VM. And this is one thing that you guys can be and maybe should be doing too, is invite each other people either on your team or in the class to check out your VM or check out your container. But I recommend that you add a user for that person. So if Rahi wanted to let Melissa or Jade or Alex log into one of his VMs, you should be creating a user called Melissa with some generic password or something, and then put that in the spreadsheet somewhere. Might need to even make a third tab for that, but that would be useful for a couple of reasons. One, because you guys can kind of check each other, and then other people that are maybe behind or maybe not sure where they're at, they can compare what they're doing to what you're doing. I'm all about sharing in this class. We're not cheating off of each other. We're just sharing. This is, in the real world, all of this stuff that we do in open systems is collaboration based. We're all kind of using information and creating new information while we're building these things. So anyway, short story. Your spreadsheet should look something like that. Make sure it's updated, because like I said, I'm going to go here and look here. Then I'm going to go log into the Proxmox server. So I'm going to go log into Proxmox 6. If I see any VMs or containers that live on that Proxmox that are not in this list within this number range, now if I see one that's like 503 or 203, I will assume that's from team 2 or team 5, and I'll go look at their spreadsheets. So don't worry about those. But if there's any others that are out there that you created and they were either fails or false starts, or they're old versions or they're practice clones or whatever, make sure you're adding them in this spreadsheet that they're there, or get rid of them. Don't leave stuff hanging out that's old unless there's a purpose for it to be there, or unless it's documented. Okay, one of the, all network managers are guilty of that, by the way.
Professor Jake, I have a question.
Yeah.
So in a production environment, you're obviously not going to have a bunch of, passwords on a spreadsheet. So how do you do it? Do you just send someone your public key and they upload that to their server so you can have your other people log into that?
That's one way to do it. What Rahi's talking about is instead of using passwords to allow people access, you use what's called an asymmetrical password method, where there's a public key and a private key. But it depends. In a lot of environments that I work in, which are relatively small environments, there's usually a master spreadsheet which is encrypted. And you can't open that spreadsheet unless you have that master password. And then within that spreadsheet is information very much like what we're looking at today, and it does have the passwords in it. That's pretty common. As long as that spreadsheet is limited as to where it's shared, like usually we don't share that spreadsheet in the cloud. It's locked down physically. like it's only available on a local network, for example, and it has a good master password in it. And there are some logging capability turned on, which you can do that with Google Sheets as well as Excel spreadsheets. You can turn on logging to see who's opened and closed a spreadsheet and looked at it before. So we're just going to stick to the standard username and password. Teaching how to use PGP and asymmetrical keys is kind of beyond the scope of this class. Okay, any other questions about this, by the way? And these don't need to be your only columns. If you guys want to add additional columns that you think will help you and help me better understand what you're doing, basically. That's what you're showing me. If you want to add, for example, a transactional tab to where this information basically is like a header and stays static, but then you have an additional tab which shows all that same information, but you basically duplicate it every time, but you make whatever little change you need to make. And then a note say like, I changed the password, but you still have the older information in there, and make that more of a transactional sheet where you make a new line for every time you change something. Not really critical for this class. It is in the real world though. Okay, let's go back to where was it? So this question here will basically be answered with your spreadsheet. Let's see. Same thing here too. And this gives you, that's how it should be named. If it's not named that, if it's not shared to me, if your team has not shared a spreadsheet to me, I have no real easy way of grading your work. I can log into the servers and see who's using the servers, but I can't really easily see if you've been completing these tasks that I've been asking you to complete, where you've installed LAMP, where you've installed Virtual Min, where you've installed WordPress, which is what we're going to be getting to very soon here. Okay. Did you create a personal username? You need to have created a personal username and use that on the Proxmox server. And that's what needs to be in that spreadsheet, by the way. So here, whatever that personal username is, I'm assuming that's what you're using to access Proxmox. You don't have to provide your personal username password for Proxmox. I don't care what that is, because I'm always just going to log in, excuse me, as root. And I don't want your team to be changing the root passwords. I think in the future, and this is with respect to Proxmox, you can change the root passwords to whatever you want in your containers or VMs. Just understand, if you want me to log into it and check it out, I've got to know what that password is most of the time. Not specifically for a container, but for a VM, I definitely need to know, because there's no real easy backdoor way, excuse me, to override that like I can with that container backdoor enter command. Okay, we good so far, guys? I'm just trying to explain this as slowly as I can so you understand what I'm looking for you. What was the container number of the first container that you created in the Proxmox server, and why did you create it? Which version of and all these questions are basically essay questions. I have to go through and read them all in order to give you a proper grade. So be as verbose as you can. Don't tell me a bunch of nothing. Make sure that it has substance in these essay questions you're submitting. But tell me why you created this container, and it was for purposes of learning how to use Linux, for example, or to install the LAMP stack, or to install Virtual Min, whatever it was. If there's multiples, Tell me about multiples. You need to have also created a VM, not just a container. I need to see that you've created both, that you've used both, and that you're executing and learning Linux commands. And then one thing that we've done this semester, and I need to add that question in, is, oh no, I'm sorry, I did add it already. I just need to change it. Installing a Linux GUI VM. Now, so far, I've showed you how, and most of you have installed directly from an ISO. A couple of you tried installing what's called X Windows. That's the generic term, by the way, X Windows. In an already existing text-based container or VM, which you can do if you want. I'm not requiring you to do that. But if you want some experience with doing that, you can certainly Google for that, how to install X Windows on top of CentOS 7, for example, or Debian 8. And you can install it there. Make sure you do not install X Windows in Proxmox. We don't want to turn Proxmox into a GUI environment. I think some of the issues, by the way, that a couple of you are having is I'm asking you to do things and you're trying to do those things on Proxmox rather than your virtual machine, like installing VirtualMin, for example, or you're trying to do things on your virtual machine that I asked you to do on Proxmox, like looking for shared storage, for example, like looking for that varlib VZ situation. I think, who was that who was asking me that question? Was that Tony? Who sent me that email about you couldn't find you could not find varlib VZ? Why, first of all, why were you looking for varlib VZ?
In Proxmox, my VM and my container.
You were looking to see the images for your VM in your container?
No, I was trying to share my container and stuff. I couldn't get past the VZ.
Share your container.
I need to move my container over to the Proxmox too.
Oh, okay. Well, let's go ahead and take a look at that now then, because maybe some of you others are getting stuck there. So what, let me remote view a machine in there. And let's just take a look at what you're trying to do real quick. Okay, you're on team 6, right?
Yep.
Can you guys see the screen okay there? Okay, now maybe I should probably be using good habits and using putty to do this. So let me use putty just because I've told you guys it's better to use putty and you should be using it. Team 6 is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 30.200, right? On port 22. Now you should probably be logging in with your own username and password, not the root user. So you're looking for your container. So you went to var lib. And then you went to VZ, but you said the VZ did not exist. I see VZ there.
Oh, what?
CD
That's weird.
lib CD VZ.
That's weird. How come I didn't?
Maybe you're, okay, so maybe a couple of things. Maybe you're not logged into Proxmox. Maybe you're actually logged into your container. Or maybe you need to be the root user. So if you're not the root user, make sure that you use the su command and become the root user temporarily. Okay. Furthermore, the containers used to be under var lib VZ. And are you looking for the backup file? Because that's what you really need to have. You're supposed to be looking for the backup file in order to.
Yeah, I was trying to do all that, but like I couldn't get past to the VZ file, so I couldn't.
So the var lib VZ dump folder is supposed to be where your backups are. So what's the VM number?
I think it's 602.
Okay, so I see VZ dump 602. There's the file right there.
Wait, are you doing the putty? Is that putty under the container, or is it under Proxmox, or is it under?
You don't see this from within the container. You have to see this from the outside world, from the outside environment. So you either need to putty to Proxmox 6 or you need to use the console.
Oh, maybe that's because I did it inside of Proxmox.
Well, there's no way it can see it. The container can't see the outside world
Oh, that's why.
unless it's been given permission, not within itself. It's like you're trying to look for groceries in the grocery store, but you're still at home.
Oh, okay.
Go to the grocery store to get the groceries, and then you can find them at home. So make sure you're logged in to
Oh, okay.
either the putty or to the GUI here, and you can also see them in the GUIs. Maybe it's easier to first find your backups in the GUI to make sure the backups are being done.
I
But
backed up both of them already, so.
so under Proxmox 6 here, under local content, there's your backups there.
Yeah. And then my containers,
Okay. You can't see them from within your container unless you specifically shared that folder to the container, and then you go into the container and you mount that share. There's no way to see it.
oh,
So that's what I thought was going on with yours. You're just
I didn't
not
look
looking
at.
in the right place.
Okay.
Okay, let's go back to this survey. Did you create a Windows-based VM? We haven't done that yet, so I will make that. I'm going to basically make at least 2 versions of this checklist because I want you to submit this first half of the checklist as soon as possible so that I can give you some sort of a midterm grade. So we haven't done this yet. We may or may not get to this. I'd like for you guys to try installing an actual Windows VM. Do you guys want to try doing that? Do you think it has any value for you?
Do we use MSDN ISOs, or where do we get our Windows ISO?
I will provide the ISOs for you.
What about the Chrome thing that you told us to install? Do we have to install the
What
Chrome?
about what?
You said you told us to install the Chrome. Should we install the Chrome too?
Install Chrome.
On the DVD VM.
Oh, on the GUI VM? Yeah, you should try installing Chrome on that. That's a separate item. You don't have to. You can just use Firefox if you want. But I recommend that you try installing something on that GUI VM so that you can prove that you installed something. You know, don't just use the VM as it is, add some things to it so that you have some experience with using the installer from the GUI. Right now, you're just familiar with most likely using apt-get to install things or yum from the command line. Where's my, hang on, let me find where I'm at. You're either using apt to install things from the command line, or if it's CentOS, you're using yum, the yum installer, use one or the other. But from within a GUI, a Linux GUI, it's easier to do because you can choose things off of a menu. Hang on one second. Somebody's asking me for a password or something. Now, I haven't showed you how to do that yet. I'll probably show that to you in the next class, but I'm just want to spend most of this time going through again where you need to be and answering any questions that you might have on that.
So when are you posting the assessment? You said,
I'll get it done. I'll get it done by this evening. I'll finish it up.
when is it due?
I'm going to make it due the end of this week, but you have multiple attempts. You can turn it in as many times as you want. So
Okay.
as soon as you see it available, start. I mean, don't do the one that's up there now because there's not much to it yet. Wait till you see an announcement that says start filling out this midterm survey or midterm assignment, so I can go see where you're at. This is more of an opinion question. You know, which one of you do you believe is more of the server manager of your team? Cancel. Let's see, where's the rest of the questions?
This hasn't been posted yet, right?
Correct. Well, no, the what has been posted is this exit survey, which is from a previous semester, but you start going through this one now so that you know what I'm going to have in that midterm survey. So let's take a look at some more of the important items on here. Let me know which GUI version you installed. Did you do a DVD install as I showed, or did you do a net install, or did you do a everything install, or did you do a live install, which I suggested that you did not do, but make sure you put in the notes there that you understand the difference between all these different installs. What is a net install versus a live install? Okay, so I'll ask that question more specifically in the midterm that I post. And so if you don't know what it is, go Google for it so you know what it is. And then tell me, pretend like you're teaching me. Okay, be as verbose as you can. I don't grade on grammar or spelling, but I do grade on content. We will get to that point where we will install a Windows VM, probably not Windows Server. We'll install a Windows 7 or a Windows 10 workstation just to show you how to do that. I assume everybody already knows how to use Windows, so we don't need to install a bunch of apps on there. Let me know which container and or VMs that you installed webmin on and the names of your domains that you created. Because I want to check to make sure that I can surf to those domains from my virtual machine, not just your virtual machine, but from my virtual machine. So I will need to add those IP addresses and domain names temporarily to my hosts file so that that name example there, angermanagementpanda.com, is resolving to whatever your IP address is for your container or VM. 192.168.30. Whatever it is. I've got to be given that information. So in the answer, you're going to say, well, I created, rahirules.com and it exists at 192.168.30.123 or whatever it is. Okay. And then if it's running something specific that's not just a web page at port 80, tell me what port number to go to, like it's running webmin on port 10,000. And here's the password. If you want me to check it out, I'd like to be able to check that out. So give me the password in your answers. when I ask for it. Did you edit your Windows VM host file to make sure that you could go to angermanagementpanda.com or whatever the IP address is? In other words, how did you resolve an IP address? You could have done it one of two ways. You could have either edited your host file, or you could have pointed your Windows virtual machine to the actual container or VM that's running the DNS for that domain, wherever you added that domain. Now, we tried doing that the other day, and it proved to be a problem because firewalls are getting in our way to where DNS, which uses port 53, is not always open on a VM or a container that you might have installed virtual min and webmin are. So I was saying, well, just to make this work, just edit the hosts file on your Windows VM. I'm not going to go look to see that you edited your host file on your Windows VM, but this is the only way that you can test it. You have to add an IP address and leave the equal sign out and the name of a domain in order to be able to test it. Did you create any other additional containers or VMs for other reasons? And why did you create them? Were they just clones to see if you could create a clone? Were you migrating, or were you trying to back up? Did you use snapshots? Now, I know I talked about snapshots earlier in the semester, but I'm going to check to make sure that you guys are using snapshots. So make sure that you don't delete all of your snapshots. I have mentioned after you came to a certain milestone, you should probably get rid of your old snapshots. Make sure there's at least some hanging out there. So if I click on snapshot here, for example, that I see that you have used snapshots for a particular purpose, make sure you're descriptive in your snapshot. So first, so the reason that Joaquin made this snapshot is because he was installing virtual min and wanted to make sure it works. So a way that is Joaquin here? Let's see. Now, let me use somebody that's here. Rahi, are you using snapshots?
I think I might have, yeah. I made a snapshot before I was messing with that VPN stuff because I didn't want to destroy
Are
networking.
you on? Or let's see who else is here. Anybody here? Jade. Let's see if Jade's using snapshots. Okay, so the point of using these snapshots is to take a snapshot of the system before you install anything to it. So what I should be seeing in these descriptions of these snapshots is before I installed virtual min, before I installed WordPress, before I did a distribution upgrade on my container to go from CentOS 7 to CentOS 8, for example. So I want to see some evidence. I don't need to see snapshots on everything, but I need to see that you've at least made a snapshot on one of your machines, whether it's a container or a VM. Need to see some snapshotting going on. So there's a good example before virtual min, and I can open that. Okay. And you need to describe a situation in which you might have rolled back. I want you to try doing this whether you needed to or not. I want you to take and designate at least one of your containers, at least one of your VMs, or make a clone of it. Make a clone of a container or a VM. I don't care which one you do. Take a snapshot, make some change, and then roll back to the previous snapshot to see if your changes reverted so that you see how those changes take effect. And the easiest change to make, I would say, is take a snapshot of a container, log into the container into the console screen, not Proxmox, but into the container console screen. Let's pretend here. Let's see what containers are here. No. So I'm in the container 601. I'm in Tony's container here. So I'll print the working directory. I'm in the root directory here. I'm just going to mkdir junk. I'm just going to make a directory called junk. And I will see that that directory that I created is there. Then, first of all, you should have taken a snapshot. So take a snapshot first, create a couple of folders called junk or trash or whatever you want to call them, as long as they don't exist. Then go back to Proxmox, roll back from that snapshot and make sure that that goes away. Okay, so I'm not going to be able to see the evidence unless you did screenshots. So I just want you to describe in the notes what you did to do this test. Well, I logged in, did a snapshot first, then I logged in, created a folder, or used Nano Editor, created a dummy file, or whatever you did, and then tried rolling back. Or you can be really silly and try to do a terrible thing like rm-rf root. Does anybody know what that would do if I were to do that, execute that?
Do not do that. do not do that.
Don't do that. Why not, Rahi?
You will make your server unusable.
Let me blow this up a little bit. I used to wear a t-shirt that had that printed on the t-shirt. RM space minus RF root or /. If you execute that on a Linux server or a Linux workstation, you're essentially deleting everything off of the hard drive. In other words, it's suicide. So don't do that. But if you want to see how powerful taking a snapshot is, Rahi, you might want to take a snapshot of a container or a VM, make sure it's finished, then go log into it and then do that RM-RF, totally F up your container, and then do a rollback to the previous snapshot, and it should work. Very powerful stuff, and so you need to get in the habit of doing it. Now, not just Proxmox, not just KVM, but every single virtual environment that's out there has the ability to make snapshots. And I want you to understand how snapshots are different from backups. You need to also be making backups, and I need to see evidence of that. And that's one of the questions as well. In other words, let me log in here. I'm going to go and look in a couple of places. There's 2 places where you set up backup. Rahi.wtf. Is WTF, by the way, Rahi? I'm looking at the chat window here.
Yeah, that's a real TLD.
That's a real TLD. WTF. That's funny. I wonder if anybody's registered OMG WTF yet.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure.
Well, that's interesting. Okay, so unlike snapshots, backups are what you need to be regularly doing, either manually or on demand or automatically. I need to see evidence that you're doing both. So for example, I'm still picking on Jade here. So in this view, if I click on backup, I can see whether or not Jade has made any backups of this VM. I don't see any backups there. So you've not been making, is Jade here? Yeah, there you are, Jade. So you haven't made any backups of this VM. Probably, what's that?
I did, remember? You saw it in the,
Oh, did you move it somewhere else temporarily?
to that local folder.
If I look at local,
You saw it earlier. Right there, see? I did it back
yeah,
up.
it may not be, no, if you look, let me just show you this. If you click here, go up here and change the storage.
Oh, okay.
You may not see it here. That's something that they've changed now. We need to change it to that to see if it exists there. So it shows there. If you can't find and you're pretty sure you made a backup, go look at the actual view of the container, the view of the storage. So we click on local and we see, oh, there it is for 602. And you might see 2 or 3 others that don't necessarily show up from this view. We're looking at the same data from just different points of view, different perspectives. So I'm going to log in to everybody's Proxmox, make sure that everybody is making backups of at least one of their containers, one of their VMs. It doesn't have to be all of them, because maybe like this, maybe that 611, I know what that is just by the name, but let's just pretend that was a clone that you were experimenting with. I don't necessarily need to see a backup of that. But what I will want to see is in the summary that you made some notes there. This was a clone of 601 as an experiment. Now, I don't see any notes on that. I'm going to scroll down the list here, and I need to see notes on the summary page. I want to see some sort of notes on every single container and every single VM. This is supplemental, more detailed information that may not be in the spreadsheet. This is kind of more your transactional information. This is where that transactional stuff I talked about before. This is where that should be. The spreadsheet is more like a table of contents for a book, and then the notes here are the pages of that book within each chapter. Getting back to backups. Need to see that there's some evidence of backups being made, like I said, manually, which would be the case here for Jade's particular VM that we're looking at here under local storage. But then, and maybe some of you are not familiar with this, so make sure you pay attention to this. There needs to be an automated backup process happening. And there can be more than one of these, but I recommend only to be one per server. So I'm going to click on Data Center. Okay, then I'm going to click on Backup from Data Center. This is where you create a backup job that can back up multiple VMs. Only one person on the server needs to do this, actually create these. You don't need to create separate jobs. They can't run at the same time. You can if you want to make sure that your VM gets updated and backed up. You can't create your own job. So let me just show you how to do this real quick. It's on Data Center. I click Backup. I'm creating a job. I'm not backing up anything right now. I'm creating a schedule that's going to run later. Storage. I'm just going to put it on my local storage. Day of the week, I'm going to run this backup job every night because I'm paranoid. You don't have to. Start time. This is team 6, so I'll start my backups at 6 a.m. just so that I don't run into anybody else's backup. Include selected VMs. Well, if this was Jade just worried about her own VMs and containers, she might just choose to go in here and just choose only hers. Send email to, whatever your email address is. And enable that, and then make sure that it runs the next day. Now, like I said, you can all create your own. In fact, that's probably a better idea. Everybody create their own backup job for your VMs and your containers only, your automated backup job. Just keep in mind that if there's others on there already, don't run them at the same time because they won't run at the same time. So I chose 6 a.m. here for Jade. So the next person on the team, James or Tony might want to schedule theirs at 5 a.m. or 4 a.m. So check the jobs that are there already. So Tony needed to schedule a job to back up her stuff, or James, don't do it at the same time. Choose a different time. So again, that's under Data Center. I need to see at least one backup job. Or maybe there's one person on your team that says, look, I'll back up everybody's. You just tell me what to back up. That's fine. In that case, probably what you should do is in your spreadsheet, in your team spreadsheet. Where's my team spreadsheet? Slide this stupid thing out of my way. There it is. You could probably, if you wanted to, this is probably a good idea, add another column. Auto backup, yes or no? And if this is a critical machine that you want to be backed up every night, stick a Y in there. If it's not a critical machine, stick a no in there, and then tell whoever your system administrator is or your team captain is, hey, if you're going to create a backup job, please go through this spreadsheet and check only the VMs that have Ys next to them, VMs and containers, because we don't want to be backing up a bunch of garbage that nobody cares about. It's just going to take up drive space and be unnecessary. Okay. So this is probably a really good idea to add a column like that. I have lots and lots of VMs and containers that I don't back up every night because they're simply clones. Like all these virtual machines that I create for you guys every semester, I don't bother to back those up because if something happens to one, I will just recreate it. You're not installing and doing a lot of work on those anyway. So even if you had to reinstall Chrome remote, it's not a big deal. I can help you do that remotely anyway. So we don't always back up everything. Got that? So what else? What else? So make sure you understand the difference between this backup entry under data center and the backup entry that you can create for each individual machine. This is a manual backup that you say, I want to do this job right now. The other one is a schedule of backups that you're creating for automated purposes. Let's go back to the snapshot and roll back. That's what I just talked about. Were your containers or VMs in an automatic nightly backup? Which ones did you designate? And I can see that if you created that column, I can see that in the spreadsheet. So I recommend that everybody add this to their spreadsheet, that auto backup, yes or no. Is it important or not, in other words? And then I'm going to go compare that to the backup job to make sure this is getting set. If you create a new container or VM, by the way, and you don't tell your system administrator, you need to make sure that you go into Proxmox and you add, under data center, you add that job, you add it to that job. So if I just created this job over here, and then Jade created a new edit. Jade created a new virtual machine or container that she wants to back up. You need to make sure to, check that new one off or uncheck the old one off. I'm just using this as an example. So you guys need to be maintaining this whenever you create or destroy a container or VM. If you get rid of a VM that's in the backup list, it should take it out for you, but I'm not positive of that. It's better to go clean up these schedules after you create or destroy a VM. Were you making appropriate notes? Okay, so that's what I pointed out earlier. I didn't see any notes for some of those containers. There's some of those VMs I'm talking about on the dashboard of Proxmox. Underneath each container, like that. That's pretty good notes there. What I don't see, Alex, is I don't see any transactional notes. And again, this is, like I said, 50% of what you guys do is documentation. So what I need to be seeing is if you did something in the last few days, I need to see something like experimenting with virtual men, whatever it is. It doesn't have to be that complicated. Something that you actually did do. Just don't make stuff up. I'm liable to check it. Not going to be able to check everything, but I'm going to spot check people. So if you put something in your notes, like I installed virtual men in this container, and then I go log into that container and I don't see any evidence of virtual men being installed, I'm going to count points off. So only make notes if they're appropriate. Okay, that's what that's asking. What else? Did your team install FreeNAS? So we haven't gotten to FreeNAS yet. I don't know if we'll get to FreeNAS this semester or not, but I think we might have some time. I talked to you guys already about using network attached storage by sharing storage. That's what this question is. Did your team make use of an NFS share on another team's Proxmox server for whatever reason? In other words, did you choose to clone a machine and move it there? Or did you simply use it as a backup space? Like, let's say, for example, oh, I want to back this up, this container 511. So I'm going to click storage. I'm going to use Proxmox 2 shared storage because it's been made available. I'll click backup now. See if I can do a backup on it. And then I'm going to make sure that I can see the backup over here that's being created. Okay, so answer the question yes, and then tell me what specifically you did with what storage. While I was on Team 5, I used Team 2 storage, Proxmox 2 shared, to make a backup, save a backup of VM 511. Or I migrated VM 511 over to Proxmox 2 shared storage just to run it there and see if it worked. And I renamed it, cloned it, whatever you did. Need to see some evidence that you used an NFS share. Might want to also describe to me, pretend I'm stupid and I don't know anything. Describe to me, what is NFS? Why is it called NFS? You didn't have to be the one that mounted it, but you need to understand the concept of NFS and what the pros and cons are of using NFS. There are reasons why using NFS is not good. What's the most important reason why you would not want to use NFS, network file sharing?
It uses regular passwords.
That's one reason. Security is an issue. If you're making your backups or you're putting stuff on somebody else's server or in the cloud, that means other people can get to it. But more importantly, it is pushing your data off across the LAN, which is only 1 megabit per second. The fastest average LANs are 1 megabit per second. So backups are going to run a lot slower than if you're just backing it up onto your own local hard drive. I'm actually working on a server in my home right now where I had a server crash over the weekend, and I had backups, but I had to restore from backup, but it was over a 1 megabit connection. So it was really slow to restore. What I should have done is maybe bonded 2 Ethernet ports together temporarily and sped up my time. Which container and VM did you install WordPress on? So I'll go ahead and talk about WordPress in just a minute here. Did you happen to install a firewall? We haven't talked about that yet. So these last few items are going to be in a final assignment. And it's going to depend, of course, on what we got accomplished this semester. So let me go ahead and talk about what other activities did you perform. So go through this survey. You don't need to answer this one because this one's going to go away. This is just a version from a previous semester, but use this as your checklist. Use this as your roadmap. Answer all these questions for yourself. Did I do this? Do I have evidence that I'm using backups? Do I have evidence that I've migrated a machine somewhere? Is there enough to prove to Jake? That's what you're trying to do here. You're trying to show me and prove to me that you have done these experiments. And your deliverables are that evidence. I see notes, I see backups, I see the results of your experiment. I don't need to really see a long essay of what you did during your experiment, but you can do that if you want. I need to see the results of it. Everything should have some sort of deliverable, even if it's just a note in a spreadsheet. It's still a deliverable. Now, I wanted to talk about WordPress. How many of you have not ever heard of WordPress? Anybody not heard of WordPress? How many of you have? Everybody has heard of WordPress. What is WordPress?
It's a very common CMS that everyone uses to make blogs and stuff.
What does CMS stand for?
Content management system.
Yeah, that's the WordPress. That's the key term here. Let me open up a notepad file or a WordPad file. The key term with respect to WordPress is content management. Now, back in the old days, we used to write code, write HTML explicitly. We would go edit an HTML file, you know, type in things like hello world or whatever we wanted to type in there. Then we start getting fancier and we start putting some HTML around it. Okay, but I tell you guys, we don't really do that much anymore. We do it some, and you do need to know how to read, and you should learn HTML code. I think you do some of this in Parks' classes, don't you?
Yeah.
You create some embedded HTML by using maybe some print commands.
Use to make like tables in HTML.
Oh, okay. So you're doing like echo select blah from blah or blah equals whatever.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay, you're writing some PHP script, semicolon, PHP crap, whatever. So a lot of companies, big and small, don't do that. They don't write code. They use code that's already written. So they use either a web authoring tool, which would be something that you would use to write code. What did you guys use, by the way, Rahi or anybody else? What were you guys using in terms of a web authoring tool or an editor?
Notepad++.
You were just using Notepad. Some people use Emacs. That's another one. You could certainly use Nano if you wanted. I used to use Front Page a long time ago, Microsoft Front Page. Can you guys see this document I'm typing, by the way?
Yeah.
Okay, so make sure you're either typing these things down or Googling these things as I'm talking about it. But most of the time, these days, people are using a content manager. Now, Virtual Min is not a content manager, Virtual Min and WebMin. That is specifically designed to maintain domains, to create and maintain domains. What are the most common things that you do? Somebody other than Rahi, talk to me or type in. What other things do you do with a domain? What are the 3 most important reasons why you have a web domain on the internet? 3 general reasons. I mean, there's more than 3, but there's 3 very basic reasons. What are they? You guys typing? You're not here? Somebody type something or say something. Why do we have uh.edu? Or why do I have profjake.com? What's the point of that? Nobody? Okay, so I'm going to only assume that just me and Rahi are here unless somebody types something. I see Tony typed in LOL a while back, and so did Jahangir. Jahangir, sorry, I can't pronounce your name very well. Okay, well, I guess we're just not having that much participation today. Do you think maybe a lot of people have left Rahi and they're going to watch the recording later?
I mean, maybe. Do you post these regularly?
No, not that regularly, but I'm getting into the habit of it. The biggest issue for me is the habit. So I'll bet that 90% of everybody's away from the keyboard right now and they're doing something else. Which is unfortunate. That's not how I want to teach the class. But anyway, so I'll just continue this for purposes of people that are watching the video later on. But if you're watching this video later on and not right now, It's better if you watch it and participate now, because if I say something you didn't hear or you didn't understand, you can be interactive and say, hey, can you repeat that again? Thank you, Julie. You just don't know the answer. Well, say something like, yeah, I hear you. Okay, all I asked was, you could have said, I don't know. I got to hear something, because I can't see anybody, so I can't see the blank stares on faces when people don't know something. Okay, so the reason that you have a domain is because you need to have something that allows email addresses for purposes of communication. So communication or information, like you've published some information on a web page. My address is this, my telephone number is this is the stuff we do. Or it is what's the term I'm looking for? That's not really the right term. You're conducting business with it. You're selling something on it. You're collecting money, and you're actually allowing people to download things and look at things or order things online. But that's the three main reasons why people have websites, why companies have websites. Also file sharing. So there's really four things: email and file sharing, information to give to potential clients, employees, and actually conducting. Here's the term. I was having a mind blank either. E-commerce. I'm sure you've heard that term about 1 billion times already by the time you get to my class. E-commerce. So one popular way to do this is use a web authoring tool, a content manager. They can do all of those things, and WordPress is one that you can do that with. WordPress. Okay, so in order to use WordPress, everybody already has to have installed VirtualMint and created a domain that works. So you need to make sure that you can go to your domain from your Windows virtual machine in the lab.
Can we make a separate container just for WordPress, or do we have to make it on an existing?
No, you can create one just for WordPress, but I would prefer that you create it underneath angermanagementpanda.com, that you create it underneath a virtual domain name that you created under VirtualMint. So you can install another VM, put VirtualMint on that VM, put a particular domain name on there. So the order of operations for doing this before you can even experiment or start with WordPress is order. Create or use a VM or container, either one, or both if you want. Install LAMP stack, install VirtualMint, create a domain. And when you create a domain, it's going to create for you subfolders under home. Let's say I created a domain monkeys.com. It's going to create a folder called home monkeys. And underneath that, it's going to create a folder for you called public_HTML. That's where all of your content is going to go. So once you've created that domain, you should go ahead, just as a proof of life, build a little index.html underneath that folder that simply has something like hello world in it, just so that you can make sure that you can go surf to that from your web browser here. You can go to monkeys.com. I don't have one. What's monkeyus.com? Monkey bar, okay, whatever. Hope that's not a porn site. Okay, well, apparently it doesn't work, but that's okay. I wonder if monkeys.coms work. You guys know who the monkeys were?
Yeah, they were a fictional band, kind of like the Beatles.
No, they were a real band.
I mean, okay.
Yeah, they were kind of like the Beatles. They're like the Backstreet Boys. They were born out of somebody's idea. Hey, let's get a band together and make a TV show out of it. So what you want to do is first do all of those things. You have to do those things first. Then you can come over to here and figure out by following tutorials how to install WordPress. Now it's going to suggest here that you can download WordPress. It's going to be, the download file is going to be a tar.gz. That's the same thing as a zip file. You're not going to really download it there. You're going to simply copy that link address. Then you're going to log into your machine with PuTTY or the console. You're going to go to that folder, and then you're going to use the wget command.
Hey, Professor Jake,
Yeah.
there might be a way to streamline this process. I don't know if you want us to do it the manual way,
Yes, I want you to do it the manual way.
because you can just if you type, you can get like a container, like for the turnkey Linux appliances, where you just install a container and it has
Correct.
WordPress.
I don't want you to do that, because then you don't learn how to do this.
Okay.
In other words, what Rahi's suggesting is, let's just go buy a vehicle that has all of the bells and whistles on it already and just drive it. Or let's go buy a vehicle that doesn't have bells and whistles, and let's install those bells and whistles. I'd rather that you learn how to do this manually. Having said that, Rahi's correct. There are a lot of containers and templates, specifically ISOs, that you can download that already have WordPress and Virtual Mint and 100 different other things installed, and those things are called appliances. So you can download an ISO of CentOS 7, for example, or CentOS 8 that already has WordPress built in, and it's already designed for e-commerce, and it's already got, WooCommerce installed, or Joomla, or it's got, email and blogging type software pre-installed. But I want you guys to manually do this at least one time so that you learn how to do it. Because maybe you want to create your own appliance someday. So there's plenty of tutorials, and I'll send out links that show you more specifically how to do this. But for right now, your walking papers, what you need to get done are, make sure that you have all of that done first, that you've created it. You're to that point. You've created a virtual machine domain that you can actually see somewhere from a browser, because you can't go any further yet. Then go read up on what is what is WordPress. And maybe the best thing to do there is go watch a video on what WordPress is. But WordPress is a full GUI-based, it's a web-based, GUI-based content manager, which you install on top of a domain, on top of a domain name, and it will create nice, pretty template web pages for you. And you use a GUI environment to edit the text of those web pages, add pictures, add modules and plugins to do various other things, such as set up a blog site where people can be blogging. So that's where I want to start to get us at. So you don't need to have WordPress installed yet, but you need to start reading up on what WordPress is and why you use WordPress. And we'll start on Wednesday actually installing WordPress, but everybody needs to be up to the point to where you've got a platform that you can install WordPress on. Then I'll walk you through doing it in class on Wednesday. What are you asking there, Hyan? Should you install the WordPress? Yes, you should install WordPress. You can do it now if you want, but if you want to wait until Wednesday, I'll do a walkthrough that you guys should all watch, and then you can be doing it at the same time on your own machine. What's another thing you should do, by the way, that I left out, that I just thought about before you install WordPress? On these little steps here. Before you actually install WordPress, what should you do to your container or your VM in case you screw it up?
Make a backup or a snapshot.
Make a snapshot. Very important, because it's very possible and very probable that you will install WordPress. You'll skip a step because it's not too simple. There's several steps. It's kind of like installing LAMP. If you skip a step, you will not have installed WordPress properly. It may be difficult to go backwards in time or redo something. So take a snapshot first. So in case it doesn't work, or you installed a module in WordPress that messes things up, you can roll back to your snapshot of before WordPress.
Does it absolutely have to be WordPress?
What else do you have in mind?
Like Ghost or something a little more lightweight, so when I'm done with this class, I can just copy it to a production server.
You can if you want, but I need to know that you've already tried to use WordPress before. So if you haven't used WordPress or installed it before, go ahead and, or whether you have or not, go ahead and install it. If you've done this before, it should be second nature.
Okay.
There's other content management tools, but WordPress by far is the most popular on the internet for small and big companies.
There's another class where you have to make a WordPress for one of your projects.
There is, and
Yeah.
so you guys are doing that what, on Amazon Web Services?
Yes.
So you have a VM and you have to download and install WordPress, or is it?
Well, you don't make an EC2. It's just like a turnkey, like the appliance where you
Okay,
just
so there's an appliance.
spins up a WordPress instance for you.
Okay, so I'm teaching more of the nuts and bolts of actually installing WordPress
Yeah.
and putting modules in. Whereas that class, it sounds like it's, here's a car for you to drive. We're going to teach you how to be a better driver of this car. Whereas I'm kind of more teaching you, here's a car and here's how to, here's a basic car. Here's how to modify it with parts on the shelf so it will be a truck, or it'll be a, so it'll be, or a boat, or so it'll be something different for a particular use. Okay, so this is where everybody needs to be at by Wednesday, with at least one of your containers, at least one of your VMs, so we can all sit down and install WordPress together, and then I'll make some recommendations as to modules, and then I'll give you a reason to have that WordPress. We want to create a blog, or we want to create an online store. That's the most common reason why WordPress is installed. Two most common reasons: either you're creating a blog, a web blog, because maybe you're a politician and you're running for office or something, or you want to sell your widgets and you don't want to use Amazon, or you don't want to use what's the other one, eBay. Set up your own store. Okay, so if there's not any questions, I'm going to go ahead and end the video. I'll post it after I teach my other two classes today. Excuse me. We're going to get into chapter 10 today. Are we at chapter 10? Yeah, we are. Okay, so I'll see you guys on Wednesday. If you have any concerns, or you're not able to do this, you're not able to get to this point, send me an email. And people that don't have a working container or VM with virtual mint already installed get first priority. Okay, thanks for participating. I know some of you are not here, even though it looks like you're here, so make sure that you're here on Wednesday. I'd much rather be teaching to people that are actually here than people that are just recording this session while they're doing something. See y'all later.